Hi, today's video is about the distinctions listening for agreement versus listening from an intention. And even though they sound very similar, they have very different impacts on our life depending on which one we're coming from in the moment. Hi, I'm Joanne Moore, professional intuitive guide and mentor, and welcome to Invitations from the Universe. In my experience, there's never a should from the universe, but rather these conversations come from an invitation from the universe to try on a new idea, paradigm, see which ones feel good, which ones fit your life and you, and then the rest discard. So today's experiment or invitation from the universe is all about the distinctions listening for agreement versus listening from an intention. So what exactly do I mean there? So let's start with the listening for agreement. This is our humanness default mode. So when we are in a conversation with somebody or we're listening to information, whether it's television or a lecture or reading a book, anything, or just talking to a friend, we are listening for whether we agree or not. We already have our beliefs set into us. So we already know what we believe, what we think, all of that on most topics. And when we're in a conversation, we listen whether we agree with or disagree with what they're saying or what we're reading. And what happens is there's not a lot of room for new information here, but we either agree or disagree. And we kind of judge the conversation based on whether we agree or disagree with it. Now, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. This is what you guys are doing in this moment is sitting there thinking, do I agree with her or not agree with her? The other possibility is to listen from an intention. So an intention is a focus of energy. It's almost like we're going to map out ahead of time what's going to happen. So when we listen from intention, we set the boundaries or parameters for the conversation. So if I was going to have a conversation with somebody, I might want to set the intention that I'm going to come into this conversation and there is going to be a golden nugget for me. Something in our speaking is going to give me an aha or transform the way I think of something. And when we do that, when we set it out ahead of time, we set the intention that that's what's going to happen. We are now coming from an expectation. So it's like we've put out the energy ahead of us that this is what we're going to have. We've mapped it out. Somewhere in this conversation, there's a golden nugget for me. And when I listen from that place, what I hear is very different from what I hear when I'm just listening for agreement or disagreement. I'm like looking for, expecting that golden nugget in any second. So I'm actually listening from a place of possibility. And when we listen from possibility, as you know, anything is possible. So what we hear shifts depending on what intention we're holding. So let me think of an example. So if I was going to have a conversation with somebody that I've known for a long time, and I've kind of noticed that we get into a rut, maybe or it's a friend or a spouse or a loved one, so I might hold the intention going into this conversation that in this conversation, in this particular circumstance, I'm going to hear something that brings me a little bit closer, gives me some insight into who they are today, because I'm operating under the assumption that they're the same person that they were last week or last year or 10 years ago when I first met them. So if I hold the intention that in this conversation, something is going to show me something new about them, something where I really get to dive into who they are or form a more intimate relationship with them. So I'm going to listen and speak in that conversation very differently than if I was simply going to listen for agreement or disagreement in what they say or how they act or like that. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? So the other thing is that it's not just in a two-way conversation, but it also works when we're listening to something. So say that So when I watch Netflix, or I have to admit that I am a Hallmark movie junkie. So when I listen to those types of entertainment, I literally listen for entertainment's sake. I want to be entertained. Do I agree? Do I not agree? Yeah, so that's it. That's what I'm listening for. I'm just listening whether I agree with what the characters are doing or not doing. I'm also a member of Gaia TV. Now, when I watch Gaia TV, I set the intention that whatever's coming up in this program, that I am going to get a golden nugget. I know for sure that every time I watch, I am going to have ahas and things are going to come up, things are going to spark. And I usually watch that television program with a piece of paper and a pen beside me because I know that there's stuff I'm going to want to make notes on, write down authors or ideas that I want to explore further, all kinds of things. So when I watch the two different programs, I watch very differently. I watch one for agreement and one from the intention that I am going to get something really juicy and good out of this. So that's a really kind of a clear view of how the two distinctions work, right? Okay, so the invitation this week is really to try on the distinction around listening from an intention. So you can set the intention depending on the circumstance and who you're having a conversation with or what you're listening to. You could set the intention that in this conversation or in this particular information that's coming to me, I'm going to have an aha. I'm going to have an epiphany, or this is really going to shift how I look at the world. Like, that's an amazing place to come from. And you are going to listen a whole lot differently than if you're simply listening for agreement or disagreement. You could also have the possibility, like I said before, of a conversation where you really get to know somebody. Or maybe it's in this conversation that you want to share something and you want to hear that they got it, that it really landed with them. Maybe you want to have a conversation where your intention is to get some information across to people. So you want to hear, or maybe you're having a conversation where you know that they need something and you're not quite sure what it is. So you want to be helpful. So you can hold the intention that in this conversation, I'm going to really understand what it is that I can do for them, how I can contribute to them, how I can be of service. So the intention will change, but coming from an intention shifts completely how we are in conversation with people, how we listen to the world, and how we listen to information. And there is nothing wrong or bad about either one of them. It's just a matter of making the choice. Because when we choose, then we open up possibility. It's when we fall into default that we close off possibilities for us. When I watch Netflix, I'm not coming from huge insights. I really just want to be entertained. And when I'm coming from a conversation, an intimate conversation with a friend, or we're talking about things that I'm passionate about, let me tell you, I take just a moment. That's all it takes, is just a moment to set an intention for that particular conversation. So that's the distinctions this week that have come up for me and downloaded from the universe. And the invitation, as always, is to try it on. See how it fits for you. See what feels good. Experiment with it. Notice, the power is in noticing. So notice this week, where is it that you're listening from an intention, or where you're listening for agreement or disagreement. Just start to notice where they show up in your life. And then every now and then, set an intention and try it on and see what happens. Make sure you comment below to let us know how it's going for you, or any ahas or agreement or disagreement that you had with this video. And if you found it helpful or insightful, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share with your friends, of course. And come on over to my Facebook page, joannemoore.ca, because the conversation will continue this week there, all about the distinctions listening for or listening from. Thanks, everybody, and have a fabulous day.